This original WSRE presentation is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you. Funding for this program is provided by the Santa Rosa Island Authority, located on beautiful Pensacola Beach, Florida, featuring a wide variety of shopping and entertainment venues, fresh from the Gulf seafood, spectacular lodging, brilliant white sand beaches, and wildlife encounters. Pensacola Beach, waiting for you and your family to explore.
To most people, the Emerald Coast of Florida conjures up visions of Destin's gleaming beachside towers, or the high-tech, high-security world of Eglin Air Force Base. But nestled within a charming historic district is a treasure trove of memories of a much simpler time. It's called the Heritage Museum, and if you happen to find yourself in Florida's Great Northwest, you'll discover it right in your own backyard.
This used to be Main Street right here, where the museum was. This was actually a bank that was built in the 50s, and this was a hop-in place. There was a drive-through, people were here, there were stores, there were shops, there were two banks. This was downtown. It slowly got invisible over time, and people just travel that road and they forget that this is the old Main Street. And yeah, they forget about us.
Most people say, I never knew it was here. We've had people from all over the world that were here, and they said, wow, this is really kind of hidden.
Well, it's a place in a center, but really it's a gathering point. That's the main thing people need to know about a museum, is it's not just static displays. Yes, we have that, but it's more the things that are going on at the museum.
Of course, the museum includes lots of information about the people who began Valparaiso in our area here.
Valparaiso, or Valp, is a Spanish word meaning Vale of Paradise. At the turn of the century, a Chicago businessman decided that Northwest Florida would be an ideal place for Northerners to spend their winters.
Valp was the planned community built by these businessmen from Chicago who did a very good job building and putting the city together and financing it.
Most of the people in this town go to the Air Force Base, Eglin. And the only reason that Air Force Base is there is because Mr. Plew gave the gunnery range free reign of some of his land for $1 a year. And then it turned into what it is today. And a lot of people don't have a clue about the origins of why there's a Valparaiso here. Mr. Perrine, Valparaiso, he said this is a beautiful place, and he called it that. I mean, there's just so much history, but it's down-to-earth history.
James Plew was the man that came down from Chicago, and he's the one, along with some other people, helped develop the area. My name is Beverly Gross, and I'm an educator here, and we're doing a tour with some of the senior citizens, and I love being a pioneer. All of you know a little bit, I think, about the history of this area. As you know, Okaloosa County, or even most of all the panhandle of Florida, it's almost divided into two parts. We have the upper part and the lower part, and the lower part is more the beach and all the other things that you know that goes on. But the upper part is where the first white settlers came. Most of them came from North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, and they came in this area.
You know, the Indians were here because there was fresh water and good hunting, and then the pioneers looked and said, hey, they said this is a good place to live, let us stay here. And they learned from the people in their past. And the pioneers were here and they did quite well. And then the next wave of folks looked at the pioneers and said, they did it pretty good. I think we can do it too. And then all of a sudden, you know, we've got Valparaiso and Niceville, and everything we do today is based on what pioneers did in the past.
We're the only institution that's, going to preserve that history and interpret it and then present it back to the community. So small museums are always going to be important, and going back to the word community, it is communal history. It's not this national history that you can get in Washington, which is also very important, but it's, history that you're able to identify with more, especially if you're a local.
purpose of the museum is to keep the history here, and it's an opportunity for people to bring things and to leave them for safekeeping. And we'll come in here and we'll start from the beginning.
Sometimes older folks like to come and they love it because they can connect. And we start in the early native, and then we walk them through the pioneer. It comes through time.
Over here is, of course, the wooden drums. They used gourds. They used animal horns you could use for digging or all kinds of things. And here are some of the different rocks and artifacts found. And right in here, some of the arrowheads.
Perhaps arrows or even flint spears were used to bring down this mammoth whose hip is on display here at the museum. Thousands of years ago, these massive elephant-like creatures roamed throughout Florida.
This truly is an area of the very beginnings. The Muskogee Creek tribes are the Native Americans that I mainly give my information to. The fact that not only was life simpler then, but that was such a different world. They lived off the land, and they were such a intellectual, deep sort of people in a very grassroots beginnings way.
It just reminded me of some of the things I have seen in museums in my hometown where they collected Indian artifacts, and it's always very interesting to know who came before you.
I think the most important thing we can learn from the Native Americans would have to be their courage and their strength, and that they were very resilient and resourceful, very resourceful people. When they hunted and when they fished and when they used things from the land, they used every part of everything. And we've kind of lost sight of that where we are in our world today. The Native Americans and what they had in their culture, in the food they ate, and their communication with one another, their artwork, their religious ceremonies, all of that is here today and applies today. But we need to take that with us in the fact that it's deeper. It's a deeper sort of meaning from what we derive from them. And we can apply that within our lives today because we truly are so hustle bustle and there are so many of us. But it's the simplicity, I would have to say.
One of the fun things about the Heritage Museum is that it features all kinds of hands-on exhibits, lots of volunteers doing crafts of a bygone era, like today, basket weaving.
Probably the biggest reason will be to come in April for Saturday in the Park, where we have all the handcrafts that go on, and we'll have about 3,000 or 4,000 folks that will come out in April of every year. So come and get involved in the programs in the museum, and that's really what's going to get you hooked on museums in general, is there's so much going on a daily basis, other than just coming for a tour.
The vast pine forests of Northwest Florida gave rise to a booming timber industry in the 19th century. The waterways and railroad lines delivered lumber to sawmills, but wood was just one of the many forest products.
The tar and gunky stuff came down and ran into a barrel. And that's what they were after back in the early days, were the tar and the pitch itself from the pine trees. And the workers would go around, see this gentleman here is actually collecting the sap from a box at the bottom. This gentleman here is scraping or pulling back the scar on the tree to refresh the scarring, to make it ooze out some more, make some more sap.
Pine tar and pitch, also known as naval stores, were used to seal the decks and bows of wooden sailing ships, and they were essential to their maintenance and production. Pine resin, harvested from cuts in the tree bark, was distilled to make turpentine, useful for everything from paint to disinfectants to soaps and perfumes. So many trees were cut down that the boom times had largely ended by the 1930s. But the history of those times is preserved at the Heritage Museum. As visitors enter the museum, a mural provides an overview of what lies ahead. Once you pass through the gift shop, you'll see exhibits that illuminate the everyday life of a bygone era, including a one-room schoolhouse, a railroad depot, a pioneer home, and displays ranging from fishing to forestry. The Heritage Museum also features space for lectures and presentations, and it has a library that is just overflowing with local lore.
All right, let's go to school. This is a hands-on museum, and this is very important for the children. And so we like to have them come in and they play like if they're in the school, and they can use slates, and we have chalk for them. And we like to tell a little bit about the school.
And that's where the true magic of museums come in, is when we're educating the children. We bring through about 8,000 school children per year through the museum. It's one of our largest audiences, and it's part of our core mission is to hand these things down to the next generation. So it's something that's just a lot of fun to be involved with.
We're lucky in that we do have some McGuffrey readers. Isn't that nice? And of course this one is a more advanced one than the other ones. And so the children can take a look at that.
It's very hands-on, yes, it is. You go through the tours, but then we also have lots of activities for the kids when they come in. Definitely different from book learning, because you see the exhibits and you get to handle and be involved in a whole different kind of hands-on history. And also, we can bring in the local school children, the 4th and 5th graders, every year when they study Florida history. They come to the local museums and they're going to get a local flavor that really gives them a sense of community, a sense of belonging that they wouldn't otherwise get from a bigger museum that's concentrating on a bigger mission.
I actually think people enjoy the most the little vignettes, the little rooms of time. It's like a little capsule. They look in there and I see people stand there and they get quiet.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to my home. I'm Mama Gross. I've had my husband and I and our children came from North Carolina, and I would like to give you a little history of this area, if I may, at this time. If you can see the mules and the type of wagon we had, you can see the inside of the house. Then you noticed in the gate over there is the oxen, and the oxen, when the people would come south, they would either have oxen or mules. Now, I've had some young visitors visiting my home, and they don't understand what stubborn as a mule is, but I bet you folks know, don't you? So, which was better, the oxen or the mules? The oxen. And the reason the oxen were better, they were very slow, but they would make the same amount of distance that a mule could make in a day, and you wouldn't get kicked, and they wouldn't stop, and you couldn't get them to not go at all like you did the old mules.
And this helps people to be able to look into, say, a room, a 1930s kitchen, and say, wow, yeah, look how hard things were. Look what she had to use to cook with. Or I remember my gram had that, or, you know, my grandpa did that. And it helps you identify that people lived normal lives then too. I mean, because we show them potato mashers, razors, every butter churns.
About how long would it take you to churn? 45 minutes to an hour? Yeah. So guess who got to do this? Some of the younger children, so they would learn their lessons as they were going along. Then all the butter would be on the paddle, right? And what kind of milk was left in here? Buttermilk, because all the butter was gone. That's a silly name, isn't it? Because they call it buttermilk and there's no butter. But anyway, you would take the paddle, you'd take off the butter, put it in a mold, and then you'd push it out in a, we used to keep our butter in here all the time.
I think we've done a very good job depicting how life was back then when the first people started settling here and the towns of Niceville and Valpy first began growing. It was obviously different, and in some very important ways.
One of the more extensive exhibits focuses on pioneer life in the Florida Panhandle. The region retained much of its rustic character until the start of the Second World War. Now, up until the 1940s, in the small communities of Walton and Okaloosa counties, it was rare to see such modern amenities as electricity, telephones, or even paved roads. Now, this room conjures up memories from a time when knowledge of hand skills was the measure of a person. In the pioneer days, everything, washing, weaving, cooking, cleaning, building, it was done by hand. The work was made much easier, though, by an array of ingenious gadgets and tools.
Of course, this is my husband's soap that he uses in here, and he lathers up really well, and then he shaves from there. How is soap made? How do we make our soap? Fat and lye, boil it in a big pot, and we usually did that in the fall because that's when we would butcher our pigs.
I do a lot of summer programs with the kids, and that's what we talk about. A lot of the things that people used in their everyday lives, we've improved them, and we still use them. And then the little light bulb goes on, and then they're more thankful to the people who went on before.
This is called ticking, and this is what we would put in for our mattress. Do any of you imagine what we use for the mattress, inside the mattress? Feathers, goose feathers. Just on your left, right there, is the different kind of pots that they would use. And of course, they had someone doing the pottery. That particular one represents the Knox Hill pottery. See that wonderful rake, how nature made that wonderful rake right there? Isn't that wonderful? And we have over there a cornstalk broom. You know what this is? It's a water chewing tobacco. See the leaves? Yeah, isn't that neat? This is a painting one of our friends did of our cabin. Ready? Turkey collar.
In a time before air conditioning, Floridians enthusiastically embraced the idea of a fireless cooker. A heated plate was inserted into the bottom of this insulated box, and food cooked slowly in these metal dishes. The concept is quite fuel efficient and is similar to a crock pot. It also created much less heat than a meal cooked over a cast iron, wood-burning stove.
The house, as the guide said, her home, as she went through that, it brought back a lot of memories of my grandparents' summer home, which had no electricity and no running water. And I often think of my mother when I was an infant, just months old, spent the summer on the island. And in today's day of disposable diapers and canned jarred baby foods and all the rest, I think, what a summer for my mother. I'm sure it was fine for me, but all of the labor-intensive jobs that mothers and wives have to do in the home, very impressive, and you begin to appreciate what you have today and how far we've come.
These days, when we talk fishing, we often think of a deep-sea charter in the Gulf of Mexico, but back in the day, it was all about the humble mullet.
Everyone who has lived here has fished. It's hard to live in this area for any appreciable amount of time and not have gone fishing at some point, whether it be on the shore, here on the bayou, or, sport fishing. Go spend a day out on a sport boat out of Destin. But fishing has always been important, whether it be for survival. All the settlers that came into this area fished because they had to eat, or they fished because they used it to trade with the farmers further north of here for corn or feed or whatever they needed, and then into a larger commercial industry. And that's such an important economic part of our history that we don't just want to forget it.
In the early days, fishermen used poles to push flat-bottomed skiffs out into the bay at night. They would listen for the splash of jumping mullet and cast their nets. They salted and preserved their catch in barrels, sold or traded what they could, and ate the rest. During the 1800s, mullet fishing played a vital role in the subsistence of most coastal pioneering families. After the turn of the 20th century, commercial fishing in Northwest Florida was centered in Niceville and Valparaiso, and then later in Destin.
We still have, large groups of people that were commercial fishermen, and that's important to them. That's their history and their heritage. Their families were so wrapped up in the fishing industry for such a long time, and it's their own personal history, their own heritage. It's important to them because it's their family history. I mean, it's like studying genealogy.
We have taken all the family histories of the local area, brought them in here, and put them in acid-free. And so when people look at them or read them, they're not touching them, and they will last a lot longer period. So as you see, there's quite a few family histories, and they go to right here.
The museum is important to me because we are the only repository for a lot of this history. We have county records and military records, and we're the only ones who hold them. We have complete collections of a lot of early city documents of the Twin Cities, and we're the only ones who have them. We've had the city governments come to us and ask for, you guys have a copy of X document. Aside from being the only holder of, important documents like that, we also have this great collection of artifacts that are only available here, donated by locals, collected by our directors and curators over the years, and it's items that are not just military and fishing related, but everyday household items that they have no specific value, but they have just this intrinsic value from being old and being from here. And once again, this is the only place to come view them, so that makes what we do here very important.
One of the things that we are the proudest of is we do have the complete set of the Civil War books. Now, this is the North and the South, and what you do is there's an index, and then in the index, you look in the index and you find who you're, if you can find him there, and then you go and tell what battle he fought in or what the different ones had.
The military plays such a prominent role in our area that naturally it would be included here at the museum. In addition to Civil War artifacts, there's references to the role that Eglin played in training Doolittle's raiders. In 1942, airmen of the U.S. Army Air Forces, led by Lieutenant Colonel James Jimmy Doolittle, carried the Battle of the Pacific to the heart of the Japanese Empire with a surprising and daring raid on Tokyo. They flew off an aircraft carrier, but they trained on airstrips right here at Eglin Air Force Base. There's even a display depicting home life during World War II. It features some pretty interesting retro relics. Check out this refrigerator.
What we specify and what we really concentrate on is that local touch and tie things. Why are things the way they are here? And why did the first people come here? And what did they do? What was their daily life like? What were they, what jobs brought them here? How hard did they struggle to get here and stay here? That's the mission that we want to concentrate on.
We deal with the larger context of history in Northwest Florida, as our name suggests. We talk about the Native Americans that lived in this area, the early industries like lumber and turpentine that really drew settlers into this area in the mid-1800s, and then all the modern industries, fishing and the military, and you can't get that at all in one museum except here.
You got to know where you came from, because if you don't know where you come from, you don't know where you're going. Because history does, it's kind of a canned phrase, but history does repeat itself. It comes in cycles. And you got to kind of have an idea of how things are going to go.
Well, it is a jewel. I think it's one of the best kept secrets of the area. And the volunteers are very dedicated and obviously have done a great job. And I certainly would encourage someone to come and spend a couple of hours. I think it would be very worthwhile.
Absolutely go to the Naval Aviation Museum. It's wonderful. Go to the Smithsonian if you get the chance. It's world class. But there's also a niche for a local education that concentrates on a local area. Why is this area the way it is now? Why are the towns where they are? Why are the people living where they are? Where's the structures that built up? Well, that's the mission that we can fulfill. We'll bring in groups of school children, we'll have festivals, we have speakers about everything from World War II to paleoarchaeology. We've had Dr. Judy Benz come over from Pensacola and talk about regional history. There's always something going on. So come by for a visit, but then find out ways to where you can plug in and get involved. That's my advice to anyone who is looking for something to do. We can fill up an afternoon, or we can fill up a whole series of classes for you.
If you're interested in visiting the museum, from I-10 just take State Road 85 South to Highway 20 and follow the signs. If you're coming from Highway 98, go north on Eglin Parkway and take Highway 20 from there.
Well, we're open Tuesday through Saturday, 10 to 4, so if you have time for a tour, come on by. But when you're here, ask about upcoming events or check our website for upcoming events. There's always something going on at the museum. Today, for instance, there's a class on basket weaving. Yesterday, we had a tour group, a guided tour group from the retirement home. They were remembering things from their childhood. And when you get them talking, they've got so much to share, and all it takes is something to jog their memory. And they'll go, oh, well, when my grandmother was at her house in the 1920s, this is what we did. And you get them talking, and that's where it comes from. It's not the static displays, it's the fact that it prompts you to talk about these things, and it allows you to engage with that, either the older folks coming in or the young folks coming in. It gives that conversation a place to start.
I just want to say how important the museum is, and we do very good and important work here. And we're kind of a hole in the wall. We're not on any of the main roads. We're buried back in the old town of Valpy. But we're here and we have a lot of important stuff going on. And we have a very good future planned as well, hopefully.
When you come to the museum, you have an opportunity to take a deep breath and slow down. It takes you back to the days when days were a little bit longer, a little bit slower, a little bit more enjoyable. And the information here at the museum flows in that pace. But here in the museum, you're visiting yesteryear, and that's wonderful.
Well, it's very nice here, and I want to say, y'all come.
We hope you've enjoyed this look at some very unique Southern coastal culture. We'll see you again next time, right in your own backyard.